I am an architect specializing in the restoration of historic mansions. Yet I am powerless in the face of my daughter's disappearance for the past 7 months. Isabella, the perfect wife, is the only anchor keeping me from collapsing. But this morning, in her office, I was stunned to see my daughter's brass compass lying alone on the desk, the one thing she swore she would never be without. A dry click echoed. The oak wall slowly shifted, revealing a passage reeking of harsh chemicals. I had just opened a door I should never have touched. Before opening this door, I want you to know that every name and setting has been completely reconstructed by me. If any resemblance to reality appears, it is only the randomness of fate, with no intention of attaching or implying anyone. And if you are still here, in this fog with me, leave a sign beneath the comments section. I need to know I am not telling this story alone in this silent room. Thank you for becoming the solid foundation that gives me enough courage to keep going. Now then, let us begin. My name is Elias Thorne. At the age of 42, the world looks at me and sees a man who has reached the peak of success. As an architect specializing in restoring historic mansions across this region of New England, my work is to mend the fractures of time, to revive the forgotten souls of brick and stone. The irony is that when my own life shattered into 1,000 pieces, I could not find a way to repair it. 7 months, exactly 214 days since Maya, my 23-year-old's daughter, vanished without a trace. On that fateful day, her SUV was found at the edge of a coastal cliff, the door wide open, the keys still in the ignition, but Maya was nowhere to be found. The police concluded it was an accident or an end caused by depression after the death of her mother, Clara, my late wife. I know Maya. She is a fighter. She carries the blood of a builder, always searching for solutions instead of surrendering. The pain is like acid, eating me from the inside every night. Without Isabella, I might have collapsed long ago. This morning, Boston lay buried beneath a thick veil of fog, the salt mist blowing in from the sea, making the red brick buildings look like ghosts in mourning. I sat in my spacious kitchen, watching steam rise from the cup of special coffee Isabella had just brewed. "Were you up all night again, Elias?" Isabella's voice was soft, like silk brushing against silk. She walked over and placed her slender hands on my shoulders. Isabella is such a perfect woman that at times I feel unworthy of her. She entered my life when I was drowning in alcohol and despair after Maya disappeared. As the chief executive of the Thorne Blackwood Real Estate Corporation, the company Clara and I built together, she took over every burden of work so I could spend my time searching for my daughter. "I was just thinking about Maya," I said hoarsely, then took a sip of the coffee. Isabella's coffee has a strange taste. It is rich, with a faint bitterness of herbs, though it leaves a lingering sweetness. Each time I finish a cup, a peculiar calm spreads through my body, easing the pounding in my head, even though it sometimes makes me feel slightly hazy, as though a thin veil separates me from reality. "We will find her, I promise." She bent down and placed a gentle kiss on my forehead. "But right now, you need to keep living. For me, all right?" I looked into her deep blue eyes, searching for comfort, and I found it. I smiled, a tired smile. Isabella then prepared to go to the office. She looked stunning in a cream-colored suit, carrying her luxurious crocodile leather handbag. Before leaving, she reminded me to get some rest. Today, though, I felt an unusual surge of energy. Perhaps it was the coffee, or perhaps the instinct of a father. I wanted to do something for Isabella. I wanted to surprise her. I decided to go to the office early, bringing a bouquet of white roses she loved, and inviting her to lunch at the seaside restaurant we once visited on our wedding anniversary. At 10 in the morning, I parked my car in front of the Thorne Blackwood Tower. I designed this building myself 15 years ago. I know every corner, every technical pipeline, every secret of this structure. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. You look much better." The old security guard looked at me with visible relief. I nodded to him and went straight up to the 28th floor, the chairman's office. When I stepped out of the elevator, the space felt strangely quiet. Isabella's secretary, a girl named Sarah, was not at her desk. Perhaps she had gone to fetch documents. I gently pushed open the heavy oak door to Isabella's office. The room was empty. Isabella must have been in a meeting room or out inspecting a project. I set the bouquet down on the desk and inhaled the lingering scent of her familiar Chanel No. 5 perfume still floating in the air. The weak morning sunlight struggled through the fog, falling across the polished mahogany desk. And that was when I saw it. Lying beside the frame of our wedding photo was a dull brass object glinting under the light. My heart seemed to stop for a beat. I stepped forward, my hands trembling as I touched it. It was an old brass compass. This was not an ordinary decorative piece. It was the compass I gave Maya for her 15th birthday. On the back was a tiny scratch shaped like the letter M, carved by Maya herself during a camping trip we took to the White Mountains. She never parted with it. Maya always said, "As long as I have this compass, I will always find my way home to you, Dad." Why was it here, on Isabella's desk? Isabella once told me that Maya had taken all her personal belongings when she ran away. The police did not find the compass in her car either. A cold sensation ran down my spine, sweeping away the haze left by the coffee. I picked up the compass and examined it more closely. It was heavier than I remembered. As an architect, I possess a particular sensitivity to weight and mechanisms. Something about this compass was wrong. I realized the bottom could rotate. Instinctively, I gently turned the brass base toward the east, the direction we always chose as our starting point when we went hiking. Click. A dry mechanical sound came from inside the compass, though the response echoed from somewhere behind me. I turned around, horrified, staring at the oak wall behind the enormous bookshelf. It was a decorative panel I had always been proud of for the precision of its carvings. Now those carvings were separating from one another. With the faint hum of an electric motor, the panel of wall began sliding aside, revealing a pitch-black void beyond. Cold air from that dark hollow washed over my face, carrying a smell I would never forget. Damp rot mixed with the sharp odor of antiseptic. It was not a built-in cabinet. It was a passage. A secret passage hidden within the building I had designed myself. A passage whose existence I knew nothing about. I stood there, frozen in place before the gap that had just revealed itself behind the bookshelf. As an architect, my mind immediately began operating on instinct. I was scanning through the technical blueprints of the Thorn Blackwood building in my memory. Floor 28, central axis, core load-bearing system. No. According to the drawings I signed and approved 15 years ago, behind this wall should have been a solid mass of reinforced concrete and the building's fire suppression water pipes. There could not possibly be any empty space here. But reality was striking me across the face with a brutal slap. A deep darkness carrying the cold breath of metal and the acrid scent of chemicals was inviting me to step inside. I took a deep breath, the bitter taste of the morning's coffee still lingering on my tongue, sending a faint stab of pain through my temples. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The bluish-white beam split the darkness, revealing a spiral staircase made of stainless steel, designed with remarkable precision and modern elegance. The thin steps seemed to float in the air, descending straight downward. I took the first step. The sound of my leather shoe touching the steel rang out dry and sharp, echoing from below like mocking laughter. The further I descended, the more suffocating the space became. The ventilation system here seemed to have been designed separately, releasing a stream of cold air that felt strangely depleted of oxygen, tightening my chest. How could I not know? I asked myself, silently cursing my own carelessness. How could Isabella construct an entire hidden structure right under my nose? I counted every step, 10, 15, 20. By my calculation, I had already descended about 5 meters below the level of the 28th floor. That meant this structure was wedged between floors 28 and 27, an empty, dead space I had once believed was reserved for the central air conditioning system. Isabella had not only taken my heart, she had taken my architectural creations and turned them into traps. When I reached the final step, I found myself standing in front of a short corridor. The walls were painted ash gray, the floor covered with rubber carpeting to absorb every sound. The chemical odor here was stronger. It smelled like a hospital, the scent of sterility pushed to an extreme. Recessed LED strips cast a cold white light without shadows, creating an unreal and terrifying atmosphere. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy steel door. It had no handle, only a fingerprint panel and a small window of glass. I approached slowly, my heart pounding so violently I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. That window, it was one-way glass. From the outside you could look in, while inside it would only appear as a mirror. I pressed my face to the glass, still gripping Maya's brass compass, as if it were my final lifeline. The world around me collapsed in an instant. Behind the glass was a room of roughly 30 square meters. It was arranged in a strange way. A spotless, white single bed, a small round table, and walls completely covered with gray soundproofing material. It resembled a high-end psychiatric ward, though there were no windows, no sign of life. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Maya, my daughter. The first sight made me want to scream, but my throat was completely paralyzed. My Maya, the girl who once shone with a radiant smile and bright, intelligent eyes, now looked like an empty shell. She had grown noticeably thinner, her skin pale to the point of translucence beneath the LED lights. She wore a loose, white nightgown, and her long hair, which I used to brush for her every morning, was now tangled and lifeless. But the most horrifying thing was her eyes. Maya was staring straight toward the mirror, the very place where I was standing, but her gaze was utterly vacant. Those eyes had no focus, as though she were looking into some void invisible to ordinary people. She was not sitting still. In her right hand, Maya held a fragment of black graphite, and she was absorbed in drawing across the soundproofed wall. I followed the line she was making and felt a cold current run down my spine. Maya was not drawing landscapes or animals the way she once loved to. She was drawing dense black spirals, eyes crossed out with harsh lines, and shattered compasses. Some of the images resembled distorted architectural maps, corridors with no exit. "Maya," I whispered, my trembling lips pressed against the icy glass. I wanted to smash the glass to pieces, rush in and hold her, shout that her father was here. But the rational mind of an architect, of a man who had tasted enough betrayal in life, held my hands back. If I acted recklessly now, I could destroy both our lives. I looked more carefully. On the small table beside the bed was a half-eaten food tray and a glass of pale blue liquid. The acrid chemical smell I had sensed earlier was coming from there. They were using drugs to control her. They were turning my daughter into a psychological experiment inside the very building I had designed. The pain inside me slowly transformed into a cold and merciless anger. I looked at Maya, then down at the compass in my hand. The mechanical click from earlier was not a coincidence. It was a coded cry for help. Maya had left the compass on Isabella's desk, or somehow made Isabella believe it was only a harmless keepsake, so that she would carelessly place it there. My daughter was fighting in her own way, and I, Elias Thorne, could not stand here and simply weep. Just as I was about to search for a way to open the steel door, a dull sound echoed from the direction of the spiral staircase. The sharp click, click of high heels striking steel. My heart skipped a beat. It was Isabella's rhythm of footsteps. I knew it well. Graceful, powerful, and full of confidence. She was coming down here. I looked around in desperation. There was nowhere to hide in this corridor. The steel door, was tightly locked. If she came down and saw me here, everything would be over. My eyes stopped at a built-in medical supply cabinet pressed against the dark corner of the hallway, right beside the technical chamber. Without time to think, I slipped inside, curling my body among boxes of medicine and folded white bedsheets, holding my breath as quietly as possible. The cabinet door had barely closed when the lights in the corridor blazed brightly. Through the narrow crack of the door, I saw the figure of the woman I had called my wife for the past 2 years. Isabella no longer carried the gentle warmth she had shown in the kitchen that morning. Her face was now as cold as a blade, those deep blue eyes radiating a cruelty that sent a chill through my spine. She stood before the one-way window, looking at Maya with a satisfied half-smile. "Good morning, my dear Maya," her voice echoed through the intercom system, sweet but dripping with venom. "You are drawing even more beautifully today than yesterday." I clenched the compass so tightly that the brass edge cut sharply into my palm. Hell was not some distant place. Hell was right in front of me, and the one who ruled it was the woman who held the key to my heart. I held my breath in the cramped darkness of the utility cabinet, my ears straining as my heartbeat pounded wildly in my chest. Through the narrow crack, I saw Isabella, the woman I had once sworn to protect for the rest of my life, looking at my daughter as if she were a broken toy. She remained there for another 2 minutes, a stretch of time that felt as long as a millennium, before turning and walking back toward the staircase. When the sound of her high heels faded above and the sharp click of the oak wall sliding shut echoed through the passage, I finally dared to exhale. A wave of nausea rose to my throat. I did not have time to collapse. I had to get inside that room. As an architect specializing in restoration, I understood that every electronic mechanism always has a mechanical weakness designed as a backup in case of power failure. I examined the fingerprint panel beside the steel door. Beneath the polished plastic surface was a narrow slit, barely 2 millimeters wide. I pulled out the thin metal measuring card from my wallet, the tool I often use to check structural cracks, and carefully slid it in. Click. The sound of the latch retracting was brutally dry in the stillness. The heavy door slowly opened. The chemical smell became stronger than ever, mixed with the thick scent of fear. Maya was still sitting on the bed, her back turned toward me. Her thin shoulders trembled slightly. The charcoal drawings on the wall looked like dark scars carved into a trapped soul. "Maya," I whispered, my voice trembling as if it were about to break apart. She flinched violently. Her reaction was not joy but sheer terror. Maya shrank back into the corner of the bed, clutching her head with both hands, her mouth stammering incoherent words. Don't beat me again. I'll drink it. Please, don't let him come in here." My heart felt as if someone had clenched it in a fist. Him? Isabella was not doing this alone. "Maya, it's Dad. Look at me, sweetheart." I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice gentle, though something inside me was screaming. She lifted her eyes. Her pupils were dilated from the drugs, giving her gaze a distant, vacant look. She looked at me but did not truly see me. She saw a ghost, another fear. "No, Dad is dead." She said Dad left. "Dad hates me. Dad doesn't want to see me anymore." "That's a lie, Maya. Look at me. Look at this compass." I knelt on the floor, holding the old brass compass in front of her. "You remember this, don't you? East is the starting point. As long as I have this compass, I will always find my way home to Dad." Maya froze. Her eyes slowly focused on the small scratch shaped like the letter M on the brass surface. A faint spark flickered in those lifeless eyes. She reached out with her thin hands, fingers stained with charcoal dust, gently touching the glass face of the compass. A hot tear rolled down her pale cheek, leaving a clean trail across her smudged skin. "Dad?" Her voice was as soft as a falling leaf. "Yes, it's me. I found you." Maya lunged forward, wrapping her arms around my neck, bursting into uncontrollable sobs. Her crying was not the cry of a child. It was the scream of a creature that had just escaped death itself. I held her fragile body, little more than bones beneath her skin, feeling the violent trembling running through every muscle. In that moment, every achievement, every blueprint, every building I had ever created became meaningless. My daughter had been trapped in this hell for 7 months beneath my very feet while I smiled and kissed the woman who had imprisoned her. "Dad, she's cruel. She and that man," Maya sobbed between choking breaths. I helped her sit upright, trying to gather the shattered pieces of truth. "Calm down, sweetheart. Tell me, what happened that night, the night at the cliff?" Maya spoke in fragments, her voice broken by the effects of heavy sedatives. That night she had accidentally overheard Isabella arguing with Julian, the lawyer I trusted like a brother, about transferring Clara's trust fund. They did not only want the money, they wanted to erase every connection I had to my past, so Isabella could completely control the corporation. When Maya tried to run to warn me, Isabella had been waiting at the door with a glass of juice. "Drink this, sweetheart. You look stressed," Maya recalled her sweet voice. After that came darkness. When Maya woke up, she found herself inside her own SUV, unable to move. Isabella stood outside, watching as the car slowly rolled toward the cliff, using a remote device Julian had installed. "I escaped, Dad, but they were waiting below," Maya whispered. "They didn't want me to die right away. They wanted me to disappear so you would collapse, so you would depend completely on her. She said if I didn't obey, she would kill you the same way she killed Mom." My ears rang. "Your mother, Clara?" I heard them talking about the doses that made Mom's heart weaker and weaker. Rage ignited inside me like wildfire. Not only Maya, Clara had been a victim too. Isabella was never a savior. She was a calculating parasite who had been planning this for decades. Suddenly a sound echoed through the ventilation system, sending a chill through my body. Ding! The elevator bell. Not the staircase, but the private elevator that ran directly from the underground parking garage to the chairman's office. And judging by the growing sound, into this hidden basement as well. "They're coming," Maya whispered in panic, clutching my shirt. "Dad, you have to go. If they see you, they'll kill both of us." I looked around. This room was a death trap. The steel door stood wide open. If I ran into the corridor, I would run straight into them. My eyes stopped on a large medical supply cabinet in the corner of the room, the only place big enough to hide a grown man. "Maya, listen to me," I whispered, gripping her shoulders. "I'm not leaving you. I'll hide over there. You have to pretend nothing happened. Don't let her suspect anything. Do you understand?" Maya nodded through her tears, hurriedly wiping her face. I quickly closed the steel door again. It locked automatically, thankfully, then slipped into the cabinet, hiding behind stacks of sheets and boxes of intravenous solution. Less than 30 seconds later, the steel door opened with a long hiss. More than one person entered. The sharp rhythm of Isabella's high heels and the heavy thud of a man's dress shoes. "She's scribbling on the wall again," Julian's voice echoed, cold and dry like stones grinding together. "Isabella, we can't keep her like this forever. Elias has started asking uncomfortable questions. He's not as fogged up by those sedatives in his coffee as he used to be." "Don't worry, Julian," Isabella replied. I could almost see the triumphant smile on her lips. "The final plan is ready. Just one more week. After the award ceremony, everything will be ours. And for now," I heard liquid being poured into a glass. "Drink it, my dear Maya. Today is a special dose. It will help you forget the pain and forget your beloved father as well." In the darkness of the cabinet, I clenched my teeth until my gums bled. My hand gripped the brass compass so tightly, its sharp edges cut deep into my skin. I had to suppress the urge to burst out and crush the throats of both of them. I needed evidence. I needed a plan to get Maya out of here alive. Through the thin crack of the cabinet door, I was watching a horrific play in which the leading role belonged to the woman I once swore to protect with my life. Isabella stood there beneath the cold, white LED lights. The elegance and grace she always displayed had completely vanished, replaced by a presence I no longer recognized. She tossed her expensive handbag onto the round table, the dry thud echoing like a gunshot. "You didn't eat again?" Her voice was no longer soft like silk brushing against silk. It hissed sharply, shrill and cutting like metal scraping across glass. Maya shrank into the corner of the bed, her eyes wide with fear. I'm not hungry. Please don't make me drink that again." "Shut up." Isabella strode forward, grabbing Maya by the hair and yanking her head back violently. I felt my knuckles turn white from gripping the edge of the brass compass. I wanted to kick the cabinet door open, to rush out and tear that woman apart. But I could still hear Julian's footsteps outside in the corridor. 2 against 1, inside a basement with no escape, would only put Maya in greater danger. Isabella pulled a syringe from her pocket containing a strange green liquid. It shimmered eerily beneath the lights, like the venom of some tropical reptile. "Do you have any idea how much effort I've spent keeping your empty little body breathing?" Isabella snarled, each word dripping with poison. "If it weren't for your mother's ridiculous will, I would have sent you to the bottom of the ocean with that car 7 months ago." I held my breath. Clara's will. "My mother left everything to me," Maya whispered, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "That's right, Clara was clever. The entire Thorne Blackwood Trust Fund and ownership of all New England properties shall belong to Maya Thorne when she turns 18. A fortune beyond imagination, Maya. Enough for Julian and me to live like royalty anywhere in the world without ever having to look at that pathetic architect father of yours again." Isabella laughed coldly, a sound devoid of warmth. "But Clara made one mistake. If you disappear without a trace for 1 year, and Elias is declared mentally incompetent due to psychological trauma, then I, as his lawful wife, and the only remaining guardian, become the legal heir. I spent 2 years drugging your father, turning him into a puppet who does nothing but draw and mourn the past. All you have to do is obediently drink this, sleep for a few more months, and when that 1-year deadline passes, I'll let you reunite with your mother at the bottom of that cliff, for real." She grabbed Maya's jaw, forcing her mouth open. Maya struggled desperately, but the strength of a girl imprisoned and drugged for 7 months could not match Isabella's brutality. The green liquid was poured straight down Maya's throat. She choked violently, her face turning purple, tears streaming down her gaunt cheeks. "Good girl." Isabella released her hair and casually took out a silk handkerchief to wipe the green droplets from her fingers. "This will help you stop dreaming about things you shouldn't dream about." My chest felt as if it were about to explode. The truth now lay exposed, more brutal than any nightmare. Isabella had not only kidnapped Maya, she had planned the destruction of my entire family long before we were married. The cups of coffee every morning, the sweet words of comfort, the kisses, they were all poisoned daggers being driven deeper into my heart, day after day. Suddenly, in the middle of my boiling rage, I shifted my foot slightly to ease the cramp tightening my leg. A faint rustling sound from the bedsheets slipped out. In this perfectly soundproof room, that noise might as well have been an explosion. Isabella froze. She turned toward the cabinet where I was hiding. Her deep blue eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Julian?" she called out toward the corridor. "What is it?" the lawyer's voice replied from outside. "Did you hear something?" "No, just the girl crying. Hurry up, we have a board meeting at 11. Isabella did not leave immediately. She walked toward me. Each step landed directly on my heartbeat. Clack, clack, clack. Cold sweat streamed down my temples, burning my eyes. I gripped the brass compass tightly, bracing myself. If she opened this cabinet door, I would use every ounce of strength I had to bring her down before Julian could intervene. Isabella stopped right in front of the cabinet. I could see her silhouette through the narrow gap and smell the familiar scent of Chanel No. 5. The fragrance I once loved, now thick with the stench of death. Her slender hand reached out and touched the cabinet handle. "Something isn't right," she murmured to herself. My heart pounded so violently, I feared it would burst through my chest. I stopped breathing entirely, my lungs aching for air. 1 second. 2 seconds. Time itself seemed frozen. Then suddenly Isabella's phone rang from the table. The sharp ringtone shattered the suffocating silence. She paused, her hand still on the cabinet handle, but her head turned toward the phone. Damn it. She let go and walked back to the table, picking up the phone. "Hello, Sarah? I know. I'm coming up. Tell them to wait 5 minutes." Isabella glanced at Maya one last time. By then, Maya had already begun to drift into unconsciousness under the effects of the drug. "Keep an eye on her, Julian. I have a strange feeling about today." The two of them left the room. The steel door hissed before slamming shut. The mechanical system carried them back to the upper floors. I collapsed onto the floor of the cabinet, breathing heavily like someone who had just survived a shipwreck. My whole body trembled, not from fear, but from a terrifying fury searching for release. I opened the cabinet door and stepped out. Maya had already fallen asleep, her breathing faint and uneven. I knelt beside her, taking her cold hand in mine. "I promise you, Maya," I whispered, my voice low but filled with unbreakable resolve. "I will not only get you out of here, I will turn this building, this company, and her entire life into ashes." She wanted a restoration architect? Then I will restore justice to this family with their blood. I stood up and looked around the room one more time, memorizing every detail. The game had changed. The old Elias Thorne had died inside that cabinet. Now only a hunter remained, beginning to set his traps. I used a handkerchief to wipe the charcoal dust from my hands, left there from Maya's drawings. I had to get out. I moved toward the steel door. At that moment, I noticed a technical detail I had missed earlier in my panic. Beside the fingerprint panel on the inside was a stainless steel latch, cleverly concealed behind a small cover plate. It was the manual emergency release required by fire safety regulations. Regulations that I myself had applied to every one of my designs. I pulled the latch hard. A hiss of compressed air sounded, and the heavy door slowly opened. I slipped into the gray corridor, turning back to look at Maya one last time before the door automatically closed, severing the connection between father and daughter with a cold click. I did not go up the spiral staircase leading directly to Isabella's office. Instead, I followed the technical corridor in the opposite direction. According to the mental blueprint in my mind, the entrance to the elevator service shaft should be at the end of this hallway. As I crept forward through the darkness of the corridor, voices echoed again. This time they came from a small ventilation opening that led directly into the private elevator lobby of the 28th floor. I froze, pressing myself against the cold wall. Did he suspect anything about those transfer documents yesterday? Julian Blackwood's voice rang out, filled with smug satisfaction. Julian, my best friend, the lawyer who had stood beside the Thorne family for 10 years, the man who held my hand at Clara's funeral and promised he would protect Maya at all costs. It turned out that his all costs was the price Isabella had paid him with money, and I would bet with her body as well. Him, Elias is nothing more than an empty shell who knows how to draw, Isabella laughed dryly. The drugs I mix into his coffee every morning keep his brain wrapped in fog. As long as he sees Julian's signature, he signs whatever we put in front of him without reading a single line. How pitiful. You have to be careful, Bella. This morning he brought flowers. That's a sign of clarity. Just a leftover fragment of memory. After today, when we finish transferring the entire New England real estate portfolio to your shell company, Elias will be worthless. We'll declare him mentally unstable after the disappearance of little Maya. A secluded psychiatric hospital on the outskirts will be the perfect residence for our brilliant architect. I clenched my teeth until my jaw ached. A brutal picture unfolded before my eyes. For 2 years, I had been living inside a trap woven from blind trust. I had signed dozens of authorization documents for Julian, believing it was the best way to protect Maya's assets while my mind was clouded. This was the bitterest lesson I had ever learned. Never grant complete financial power of attorney to anyone, whether a spouse or a best friend, without an independent system of oversight. Absolute trust in business and finance is not a virtue. It is suicide. I had handed the keys to my house to the thieves and smiled while thanking them. My blind authorization had allowed them to manipulate the trust funds, turning Clara's assets into a weapon meant to destroy me. Isabella did not only want my life, she wanted to strip the Thorne family of its entire legacy, turn me into a penniless madman before throwing me away into some dark corner of the world. The sound of the elevator signaled their departure. I waited 2 more minutes to make sure the space had fallen completely silent. Then I slipped through the emergency hatch of the service shaft and dropped down into the lobby of the 27th floor, a level currently under renovation and completely deserted. I rushed into the restroom, splashing cold water onto my face to wash away the exhaustion and the lingering effects of the drugs Isabella had been feeding me. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a stranger. Eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness and rage, but deep inside them burned a cold, razor-sharp light. I took out my phone, my hands still trembling. I did not call the police. Julian had eyes and ears everywhere, and with the current power of the Thorne Blackwood Corporation, they could suffocate any investigation before it even began. I needed someone outside the law, or at least someone beyond Julian's influence. I left the building through the emergency exit used by the janitorial staff. When I stepped onto the streets of Boston, the salty sea air struck my face, and I felt as if I had been resurrected from a concrete tomb. The bouquet of white roses I had left on Isabella's desk had probably been thrown into the trash by now, just as she had thrown away my love and my trust. I stepped into a public phone booth, one of the few still remaining in the city, and dialed a number I had memorized 2 years ago. A number Detective Miller had given me before I fired him for daring to speak ill of my perfect wife. Miller speaking, a hoarse, weary voice answered on the other end. "This is Elias Thorne," I said, my voice low but sharp. "I owe you an apology, and I need your help to burn down a kingdom." I looked up at the 28th floor of the Thorne Blackwood Tower. The sunlight was hidden behind gray clouds, making the building look like a black blade stabbing into the sky. "Isabella, Julian, you think you have sealed me inside a wall of lies, but you forgot one thing. I am the man who built that wall, and I know exactly which weakness will bring the entire structure crashing down." The hunt had officially begun. I leaned my back against an old cast-iron street lamp outside the square, letting the cold Boston sea wind lash straight across my face. The muscles in my face were still twitching violently after the rage I had just endured in that basement. But in the middle of that storm of emotion, a cold truth began to crystallize in my mind, sharp and terrifying like a shard of broken glass. All this time I had blamed myself. I believed I was falling apart. For the past 6 months I had lived in a state I called the fog of grief. I forgot important appointments, dropped my pen while drawing, and sometimes stood in the middle of the living room without remembering what I intended to do. I thought it was the consequence of depression after Maya disappeared. Isabella was always there, gently reminding me, "You're tired, Elias. Let me handle it. You should rest." But now, standing in the open air, far away from the suffocating atmosphere of the Thorne Blackwood building, that fog was being torn apart. I remembered the taste of my coffee every morning, that herbal bitterness I once believed was Isabella's refined touch. Every time I finished drinking it, my mind would become strangely light, an artificial calm spreading through me, making me ready to sign any document Julian placed in front of me without the slightest suspicion. "She's been poisoning me," I whispered into the empty air, my voice carried away by the wind. One sip at a time, every single day. It was not the kind of poison meant to kill instantly. It was a slow massacre of the will. As an architect, I understood that if you want to destroy a building without drawing attention, you do not use explosives. You only need to pour a little acid into the joints of the steel structure day after day until the entire skeleton rots and collapses under its own weight. Isabella had done exactly that to my brain. I looked down at my hand. It was still trembling, but not because of the drugs. It was because I realized how close I had come to becoming an accomplice in the destruction of my own daughter through this chemical weakness. I could not go home immediately. I needed proof. An architect never reports a structural failure without a test sample. I returned to the parking area but did not take my SUV. Instead, I rented an ordinary car with cash from a small shop nearby, something the corporation's tracking systems could not follow. I drove back to my villa in the suburbs, where Isabella surely believed I was sleeping through another haze of confusion. The house was silent. I slipped in through the servant's entrance. There, the modern kitchen I had designed with my own hands, I saw the expensive espresso machine still giving off a faint warmth. In the waste tray, the dark coffee grounds were still there. I pulled a small glass vial from my pocket, the kind I used to store paint samples, and carefully scooped some of the coffee grounds into it. Then I searched the locked medicine cabinet of Isabella in the guest bathroom. She was careful, but she had been too confident in my supposed confusion. Behind several expensive skincare bottles, I found a small, unlabeled glass container filled with a clear liquid that carried the same sharp scent I had noticed in the secret basement. I took a small sample of the liquid. This would be the death sentence for our marriage. When I stepped out of the villa, my heart was pounding violently. Part of me wanted to stay there, wait for Isabella to come home and scream in her face, force her to kneel and confess everything. I wanted to crush that elegant mask with my bare hands. But the image of Maya sitting lifelessly drawing on the gray wall appeared in my mind and stopped me. "Stay calm, Elias. If you explode now, Maya will die." This internal battle was more brutal than any business negotiation I had ever faced. It was the struggle between the instinct of a betrayed man and the reason of a father saving his child. I had to maintain the appearance of a defeated man, a submissive husband, an architect slowly losing his sanity. I drove to a private laboratory located in the industrial district of South Boston, a place Miller had once recommended. It was a shabby office, but the specialist there was a former FBI technician, a man who cared only about cash and the blunt truth of chemical reactions. "I need to know what's in these," I said coldly, placing the 2 sample vials on the table. "And I need the results within 6 hours. I'll pay triple." The man looked at me through his thick glasses and nodded without saying a word. I left the laboratory, feeling every passing second like a knife stabbing into my back. I had to return to my performance. I had to be home before Isabella came back from the company. When I arrived home, I deliberately spilled a bottle of ink across the drawing on my desk, creating the appearance of a panicked and clumsy man. When I heard Isabella's car on the gravel driveway, I lay down on the sofa, closed my eyes, and pretended to sink into the same exhausted sleep she had grown accustomed to seeing. The door opened. The sound of high heels striking the wooden floor echoed steadily. I felt her approach, the heavy scent of Chanel No. 5 surrounding her, a fragrance that now smelled to me like the odor of a corpse. "Elias? You fell asleep here again?" She placed her hand on my forehead. Her palm was cool, disturbingly cool. I forced myself not to shiver, not to jump up and snap that hand in half. I have a bit of a headache, Bella," I murmured, deliberately making my voice dull and lifeless. I think I ruined the drawing again. It's all right, my love, she said gently, the smile in her voice filling me with disgust. Let me make you a cup of coffee. It will help you feel better. I lay there, listening to the coffee machine working in the kitchen. Every tiny sound stretched my nerves tight as a wire. I was inside my own home, beside the woman who had shared my bed, yet I felt like a prisoner waiting for the final bowl of poison. She returned with a white porcelain cup. Drink it. I sat up and took the cup. Steam rose from it, carrying that deadly herbal bitterness. I looked into Isabella's deep blue eyes watching me with a cold expectation. In that moment, I understood that this was not merely a financial crime or a personal revenge. This was a war between predators. Isabella had hunted my family for years, and now the prey had awakened. But it had to continue pretending to be dead until its claws were sharp enough to tear the enemy's throat apart. I raised the cup to my lips and pretended to take a large sip, letting the liquid only touch my lips before cleverly using my handkerchief to dab it away. Thank you, Bella, I whispered, forcing out a weak smile. I don't know what I would do without you. You will never have to worry about that, Elias, she replied, stroking my hair. I will always be here to take care of you and everything you leave behind. I shivered. Everything you leave behind. She had already begun speaking about me as if I were dead. This game, Isabella, you think you have already won. But you forget that when an architect wants to demolish a flawed structure, he does not merely tear down the walls. He brings down the entire foundation. And I have already begun placing the first explosives beneath your feet. Night in New England is never truly silent. The wind whistling through the stone gaps of the old villa sounded like whispers from ghosts trying to warn me. I sat in the dark study, the only light coming from the screen of my personal laptop, which I had encrypted long ago, completely separated from the internal network of the Thorn Blackwood Corporation. Isabella was asleep. Or at least, she was pretending to sleep in the bedroom heavy with the scent of lavender oil, a fragrance I now realized was only another layer of fog meant to hide the smell of death. I began accessing the BIM system of the Thorn Blackwood Tower. To an ordinary person, these were just complex 3D drawings, but to me, it was the map of a living body. I entered the coordinates of the 28th floor office and started analyzing the load variables. An architect can never deceive numbers. According to my calculations, the deflection of the steel beam at that coordinate was more than 0.5% greater than the original design. Using the deflection formula, I realized that a mass equivalent to roughly 12 tons had been added between the 27th and 28th floors without appearing in any structural report. That was the basement. That was the tumor Isabella had implanted into the creation of my life. I dug deeper into the hidden invoices within the Building Maintenance Fund of 2023. That was the period when I was drowning in alcohol after Maya disappeared. There it was, a payment of $2.4 million to a contractor named Stratos Structural, based in Cyprus. I had never heard of that company. Using the research skills of someone accustomed to restoring old archives, I traced the tax identification code of Stratos. It turned out to be a contractor specializing in the construction of private military bunkers in Eastern Europe. They came to Boston under the cover of air conditioning consultants, working entirely at night and using the freight elevator meant for garbage to transport materials. Isabella had hired a mercenary crew to build a prison for my daughter right beneath my feet. But the largest question still remained. Why? Money was one reason, but the cruelty she showed toward Maya and the way she destroyed my mind revealed a much deeper, personal hatred. I began searching the digital archives of the Boston Business Journal from 15 years ago. I typed the keyword, Thorn & Co. Hostile Takeover. A series of old headlines appeared. In 2011, Clara and I, young and ambitious architects at the time, carried out an aggressive takeover of Vane Industries. It became the stepping stone that turned Thorne into the empire it is today. The chairman of Vane Industries, Silas Vane, was pushed to the edge. I paused at a faded black and white photograph. Silas Vane stood in front of his former building, his face hollow with shock. Beside him was a young daughter, about 14 years old, with deep blue eyes filled with sorrow and a small V-shaped scar on the edge of her left ear. A feature I had never noticed until now on Isabella, who always used her long platinum hair to conceal it. A short article on the following page froze the blood in my veins. Silas Vane ends his life in his office after bankruptcy, leaves behind a wife and young daughter in poverty. Isabella was not named Isabella. Her real name was Isabel Vane. All the final pieces snapped into place, forming a brutal picture. Our chance meeting at an architectural exhibition 2 years ago, the way she understood my tastes, the way she gained Clara's trust before she died. Everything had been part of a revenge plan that lasted 15 years. She did not only want money, she wanted me to experience the loss of everything. My wife, my daughter, my sanity, and finally to watch my legacy devoured by the daughter of the man I destroyed. Isabella, or Isabel, had spent her entire youth transforming herself into the perfect woman I dreamed of, only to become the sharpest blade buried in my heart. She had watched us from the shadows, waiting for the moment when we were most vulnerable. 15 years, I whispered, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. You prepared for 15 years just to do this? A chill ran down my spine when I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. I quickly closed the laptop and held my breath. The study door slowly opened. Isabella stood there, wearing a thin silk robe, her face pale under the moonlight. Elias? Why are you still awake? She stepped closer, her voice still sweet as honey, the kind of honey I now knew was laced with arsenic. I can't sleep, Bella, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling with rage. I was looking at some old drawings. I feel like I've forgotten something important about the structure of the building. She placed her hand on my shoulder, her slender fingers tightening around me like the tentacles of an octopus. Don't worry so much, my love. The past is something we should leave behind. That building is my responsibility now. All you need to do is trust me, all right? I looked up at her, into the deep blue eyes of Isabel Vane. I saw not love there, but the satisfaction of a hunter who believed the prey had fully fallen into the trap. I trust you, Bella, I lied, a lie performed with every ounce of acting skill I possessed. I always trust you. She smiled, radiant and chilling to the bone. Good. Let's go to sleep. Tomorrow is an important day. We have the final signing with Julian. When she turned away, I looked at the small scar behind her ear, the mark of Silas Vane. Your revenge game has lasted 15 years, Isabel. But you made one mistake. You let me wake up before the game ended. I am no longer the weak Elias Thorne. I am the architect of destruction. And tonight, I have found the fatal crack in your wall. I stood in the darkness of the 27th floor, my breath light as mist. The Rolex on my wrist, the luxurious gift Isabella gave me for our first wedding anniversary, was now nothing more than a cold countdown device. 2:14 a.m. The entire Thorne Blackwood Tower slept beneath its shell of glass and steel, but I knew that within its core, a demon was awake. Tonight I was no longer the weak husband surrounded by cups of poisoned coffee. I was Elias Thorne, the architect who had drawn every line of this concrete mass. I carried a small tool bag with me, a multi-purpose steel cutter, an industrial endoscope, and a small handheld oxygen tank used by divers. My plan relied on a loophole I had intentionally left in the original design 15 years ago as an emergency ventilation measure. It was the central air duct system, a network of 24-inch galvanized tunnels running between the ceiling of the 27th floor and the floor of the 28th. Isabella might have hired a foreign crew to build a secret chamber, but she could not alter the entire lung system of the building without collapsing its load-bearing structure. I removed the ventilation grill at the end of the 27th floor corridor. Even the faint metallic sound made my heart jump. I slipped inside. The space was narrow, thick with the smell of industrial dust and machine oil. I crawled like a thief inside my own creation. Clank, clank. The echo of my body brushing the metal walls rang back in a haunting rhythm. After 10 minutes of crawling, I reached the intersection beneath Isabella's office. I slid the endoscope through a narrow gap. The image appeared on the screen. Maya was curled up on the bed, the sickly blue LED light of the cell casting a deathly hue across her face. I used the cutter to break the latches of the auxiliary air outlet, the one I had identified through the BIM schematic as being directly above the medical cabinet inside the cell. I dropped down, landing softly on the white bedsheets. "Maya, it's Dad," I whispered, gently shaking her shoulder. Maya opened her eyes. Her pupils were wide and clouded. She looked at me, but it took several seconds before reality reached her. "Dad?" Her voice was weak, barely more than a breath. "Did you really come back? I thought it was a dream from the drugs." "It's not a dream. Come on, my girl. We're getting out of here right now." I helped Maya up, but the moment her feet touched the floor, she collapsed like a sandcastle before the tide. Her legs had no strength at all. 7 months of confinement in a narrow space, and the side effects of that blue liquid had caused her muscles to waste away severely. I can't stand, Dad," Maya sobbed, her hot tears soaking into my shoulder. "Just go. Leave me." "Don't say nonsense," I hissed, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'll carry you." I lifted Maya onto my back, tying a long cloth around our waist to secure her. The weight of her stunned me. She was frighteningly light, like a skeleton wrapped in dry skin. I climbed onto the medical cabinet, trying to guide Maya into the ventilation duct. Everything moved slowly and painfully. Inside the cramped tunnel, I had to crawl with my elbows while keeping Maya from scraping against the sharp metal walls. My breathing echoed harshly. "Hang on, Maya. Just 10 more meters to the emergency exit on the 27th floor." But just as we passed beneath Isabella's office floor, a thin, red beam stretched across my vision like a thread. I froze. Cold sweat ran down my chin. Infrared. Isabel Vane, the woman behind the Isabella mask, had done more than build a basement. Her Stratos structural contractors had installed an independent optical sensor system powered by backup batteries, completely disconnected from the main security network that I could access. It was placed directly within the main ventilation shafts to prevent any intrusion or escape through this route. I tried to move back, but Maya's body was too weak. She shifted slightly in pain. That single movement brought her shoulder across the red beam. Beep, beep, beep. A low-frequency alarm sounded, too quiet to disturb the entire building, but loud enough to send an urgent signal to the phone of the person lying just above us. Immediately, hurried footsteps thundered from Isabella's office. Lights above burst on, shining through the cracks of the duct. "There's an intruder," Julian shouted. "Check the cell camera now." "She's gone," Isabella's voice hissed, filled with a cruelty I had never heard at home. "Search the ventilation system. They can't have gone far." My heart felt ready to explode. I looked at Maya on my back. She was completely exhausted, her breathing broken and weak. If I kept moving, they would catch both of us at the end of the duct. And then Isabella would not hesitate to eliminate me immediately to protect her secret. I looked behind me, then forward. The most cruel choice a father could ever face appeared before my eyes. "Maya, listen to me," I whispered, my voice trembling but firm. "The system is alarmed. If we go together, we'll both be caught. I need to get out and continue the plan to expose her. If I'm captured now, you'll never have another chance to leave this place." Maya looked at me, her eyes filled with unimaginable despair. But then a final spark of reason flickered within them. Go, Dad. If you stay, we lose everything. I quickly lowered Maya back into the cell through the air outlet. I laid her on the bed and pulled the blanket over her as if she were still sleeping. I had to erase every trace. I closed the outlet and hastily wiped the dust marks on the floor. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I vowed silently through tears. I climbed back into the duct, crawling frantically toward the 27th floor. The moment I dropped onto the corridor floor and closed the ventilation grill, a flashlight beam swept in from the stairwell. I slipped into the darkness of a construction room, hiding behind large sheets of drywall. Isabella and Julian rushed past, less than 2 meters away from me. Under the flashlight, Isabella's face looked like a true demon, platinum hair disheveled, deep blue eyes blazing with hatred. No one here, Julian panted. Probably a false alarm from rats or air pressure. There are never false alarms with Stratos systems, Isabella snapped. Go to the cell and check the girl again. I stood motionless in the darkness, listening as their footsteps faded. My chest ached as if thousands of needles were piercing it. I had left my child behind. I had brought her close to the light of freedom, only to push her back into the darkness. The wave of guilt nearly made me collapse, but I knew I could not allow that. I had to live. I had to keep this precious freedom to carry out the next step. I looked out the window of the 27th floor. The city of Boston still glittered with lights, indifferent and cold. I gripped the brass compass in my coat pocket, its sharp edge cutting into my palm until it bled. The physical pain kept my mind sharper than ever. I will come back for you tomorrow night, Maya, I whispered to myself, a vow carved into my soul with blood and tears. And this time, I won't take you through the ventilation shafts. I will walk through the front door, and I will let the whole world see their corruption. I left the building through the exit used by the cleaning staff. This time, I did not take a hired car, but walked into the foggy night. Every step was a reproach against myself, but also a hammer strike forging my will for revenge. Isabella, you won this battle, but you have just officially started a total war in which I have nothing left to lose except my own life. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most terrifying opponent you will ever face. Boston's rain began to fall heavier, each drop striking the windshield of the cheap rental car like insults from the past. I drove through the busy old districts, heading towards South End, where dim neon lights masked rows of shabby apartments. I stopped in front of an aging red brick building, where a detective's office lay at the end of a dark hallway, thick with the smell of cheap tobacco. 2 years ago, I had stood somewhere far more luxurious, shouting in this man's face and throwing his termination check against his chest. You're insane, Miller. Isabella is the angel who saved me, and you're just a cheap detective digging through garbage to extort money. That was what I said. I defended the murderer and drove away the only man who tried to warn me. I knocked on the door. Slow footsteps moved inside. Then the door opened, revealing a man in his 50s with white hair and eyes marked by deep crow's feet of exhaustion. Arthur Miller looked at me, his breath smelling of whiskey, but his gaze remained sharp as a surgical blade. Mr. Thorne, Miller said with a faint smile, one without warmth. Did you come here to sue me for the remaining fee, or to boast about your happy marriage? I said nothing. I slowly took Maya's old brass compass from my pocket, placed it in my palm, and showed him the scratch shaped like the letter M. Miller froze. He looked at the compass, then into my bloodshot, hollow eyes burning with hatred. He understood immediately. Detective Miller said nothing sarcastic after that. He stepped aside and gestured for me to come in. I owe you an apology, Miller, I said hoarsely as I sat down on a torn leather chair. You were right. About everything. Isabella, Isabel Vane. She's been holding Maya inside my own building. Miller poured me a glass of water and sat down across from me. I don't need an apology, Elias. I need justice for that girl. I've been following this case for 2 years, even after you fired me. I knew something was wrong with the Stratos contractors from Cyprus, but I couldn't break into the 28th floor. Now we can, I said, pulling out the technical drawings I had secretly printed from the BIM system. I know every corner, but I need equipment. I need undeniable evidence before the police step in, because Julian has already bribed half of the Boston Police Department. Miller stood up and walked to a large steel cabinet in the corner. He unlocked it, revealing an arsenal of technology I had only seen in detective films. "These are toys I spent my entire fortune collecting," Miller said, pulling out a plastic box filled with tiny black pellets like pepper grains. Superconductive listening bugs. They can penetrate 20 centimeters of soundproof insulation. And this, micro cameras the size of seeds, 4K resolution, capable of camouflaging themselves to match surface colors. They run on vibration-converted energy. That means every time she talks, the device charges itself. We spent the next 3 hours planning. Miller was not only a detective, he was an expert in criminal psychology. He taught me how to move to avoid thermal camera blind spots, how to place listening devices where sound waves naturally resonate, inside chandelier cavities or beneath a mahogany table. "Elias, listen," Miller said, placing a hand on my shoulder, his voice serious. "Tonight is a reckless infiltration. If you get caught, I cannot save you. You must be a ghost inside your own building." I nodded. Fear had disappeared, replaced by a terrifying clarity. 4:30 a.m. I returned to the Thorn Blackwood Tower. This time I entered through the industrial garbage chute in the basement, a route no camera monitored because of its filth and stench. I crawled through piles of office waste, humiliation drowned beneath my will for revenge. When I emerged into the corridor on the 28th floor, I moved like a ghost merging with darkness. I used the administrative access card I had secretly cloned from Isabella's desk the night before. The chairman's office door opened silently. The scent of Chanel No. 5 still lingered, making me nauseous. I did not turn on the lights. Under the dim glow of the city shining through the glass walls, I began my work. First, I climbed onto Isabella's leather chair. With the steady hands of an architect accustomed to assembling delicate models, I removed the casing of the crystal chandelier in the center of the room. I planted a listening bug deep within its copper core. Next, I knelt beneath the mahogany desk, the place where she and Julian often discussed their cruel plans. I fixed the seed-sized camera into a hidden corner where it could capture the face of anyone sitting there and the screen of her computer. The most difficult step was installing a device inside the basement chamber. I approached the oak bookshelf and held up the brass compass. A mechanical click sounded, and the wall opened. I descended the spiral staircase, my heart pounding. Maya was still unconscious under the effects of the drug. I suppressed my grief and did not wake her. I attached a miniature listening device behind the electronic control panel inside the cell. I wanted to hear every insult, every scheme Isabella planned against my daughter. Suddenly, the engine of Isabella's private elevator began to move. A low, mechanical hum. The blood in my veins froze. She returned to the office at 5 in the morning? I had no way out. The stairwell was too far. I had only one option: climb into the technical ceiling above the hidden chamber, where narrow spaces held electrical cables. I pulled myself up, sweat pouring from my body, trying not to make the slightest sound. Just as I closed the ceiling panel above me, the office door opened. The sharp echo of high heels struck the floor directly above my head. "Are you certain there was an alarm, Julian?" Isabella's voice cut sharply through the internal speaker system. "The alert came clearly to my phone, Bella." There was a drop in pressure in the ventilation ducts. "It might be Elias. He's sleeping like a pig at home after last night's coffee," Isabella said with a faint laugh. "But to be safe, check the hidden cameras in the basement." I lay motionless, pressing my chest against the cold concrete, breathing as lightly as possible. Through a small gap in the technical ceiling, I saw the beam of Julian's flashlight sweep across the room below. He walked past Maya, roughly pulling back her blanket to check before grunting. "The girl's still here. Probably just a rat in the ducts." "It had better be," Isabella said. "Tomorrow is the awards ceremony. After I receive the Philanthropist of the Year award, we'll end everything. Elias will be sent to a residential psychiatric hospital in Vermont, and the girl, you know what to do." "Understood. An electrical fire on the 28th floor will erase every trace." Lying in the darkness, I heard every word. Rage surged through me, urging me to leap down and kill them immediately. But Miller was right. I needed evidence, and the camera I had just installed was recording the entire conversation, every cruel gesture they made. 15 minutes later, they left. I waited longer until the building was completely silent again. Then I climbed down and slipped out the same way I had entered. When I returned to Miller's car parked 2 blocks away, he was wearing headphones, eyes fixed on a tablet screen. The black and white feed from Isabella's office appeared clearly. "You did very well, Elias," Miller said, removing the headphones and handing me a cigarette. "We now have enough evidence of conspiracy to murder and asset theft. Now the only thing we need is to get Maya out safely before they set the fire." I looked up at the Thorn Blackwood Tower. It was no longer an architectural achievement to be proud of. It was a battlefield. "I won't only get Maya out," I said, my voice cold as a New England winter. "I will make them walk straight into the fire they prepared for my daughter and me." Miller looked at me and smiled, the smile of a hunter who had found his prey. "So what is the plan for tomorrow's award ceremony?" "Very simple," I replied. "Isabella wants a grand ceremony. I will give her a performance the entire world will never forget." I held the brass compass in my hand. The needle still pointed east, the direction of a new beginning. Tonight, I found my ally. Tomorrow night, I will reclaim my life from the ashes of betrayal. I returned to the suburban villa just as dawn began to rise beyond the old maple trees. Boston's mist still clung faintly to the car windows, like the veil of deception I had worn across my face for the past 2 years. In my coat pocket, the listening device from Miller quietly recorded the terrifyingly steady rhythm of my heartbeat. I stepped into the house, deliberately making an unsteady noise, my shoulder brushing against the oak doorframe, something a sober architect would never do, but a man ruined by the coffee fog easily might. "Elias, you're back already?" Isabella's voice came from the kitchen, bright and full of fabricated concern. I stood at the doorway, looking at her. Isabella was wearing a turquoise silk dress, her platinum hair neatly tied back, looking exactly like a goddess from classical frescoes. Now, through the lens of truth, I saw nothing more than a cobra coiled patiently for its moment. I woke up early, went for a walk. "My head hurts so much, Bella," I murmured, rubbing my temples, my eyes deliberately unfocused. "Poor thing. Come here, my love. I've already made coffee for you." She placed a Meissen porcelain cup on the table. Thin steam rose from it, carrying the seductive aroma of premium Arabica beans. Hidden deep within it was the faint bitterness that Miller's laboratory had just confirmed. A high concentration of scopolamine mixed with derivatives of digitalis. A perfect mixture to turn a man into an obedient puppet before quietly stopping his heart in a heart failure accident. I sat down and accepted the cup from her hand. Isabella's fingers brushed lightly across the back of my hand. A touch I once believed to be affection. Now it felt like the cold skin of a reptile. "Drink it. It will help you stay sharp for tonight," she smiled, her deep blue eyes watching me without shifting a single millimeter. I raised the cup to my lips. A skilled architect always knows how to exploit blind spots in a space. I pretended to cough dryly, my left hand reaching for a napkin on the table, nudging the large hydrangea vase in the center of the dining table. In the moment my body blocked Isabella's view, I tilted the cup slightly and poured half of the deadly liquid into the lush ficus plant beside my chair. I took a small sip, just enough to touch the tip of my tongue before wiping it away immediately with a napkin, and set the cup down with a fabricated sigh of satisfaction. Thank you, Bella. I feel lighter already. That evening, the villa felt strangely quiet. Only the crackling of the fireplace and the faint clinking of cutlery against porcelain echoed through dinner. Isabella had prepared pan-seared steak, my favorite. I sat across from her, feeling the strange thrill of a hunter pretending to be prey. It was time to begin the cat and mouse game. Bella, I began, deliberately letting my voice drift into a dreamy tone. Today, when I walked past Clara's old office on the 27th floor, I suddenly remembered something. Isabella froze. The piece of steak on her fork paused in midair. Firelight from the hearth danced in her eyes, casting flickering shadows. You're thinking about the past again, Elias. Dr. Julian said that's not good for your recovery. I know, but it's strange. I dreamed about a compass, an old brass compass with an M-shaped scratch, I said, keeping my eyes on the plate while my mind scanned every subtle shift in her facial muscles. I remember Maya always carried it. Lately, I keep seeing it on your desk. Maybe I'm mistaken. A suffocating silence filled the room. I could hear the ticking of the pendulum clock in the hallway, each beat like a hammer striking Isabella's tightening nerves. You must be mistaken, my love, Isabella said calmly, though I noticed her fingers tightening around the fork handle until they turned pale. That compass disappeared with Maya. You're just imagining things because you're tired. Maybe, I sighed, leaning back in my chair. My memory lately feels like a blueprint smudged with ink. But there's one thing I can't forget. I remember how Clara got sick. She also had hallucinations, forgot things, and her heart always beat so fast. I leaned slightly forward so the chandelier light illuminated my face. You know, Bella, lately my heart feels strange too, as if someone is slowly pulling the foundation from beneath the building I'm standing on. Isabella's eyes flickered for a moment. It was not remorse. It was the fear of a predator realizing that its prey might not be completely under control. She placed her utensils down and reached across the table to take my hand. You're frightening yourself, Elias. Clara died from illness. That is the tragic truth. You're not like her. I'm here. I take care of you every day. I know you take care of me very carefully, Bella. I emphasize the word carefully with a low voice. So carefully that sometimes I wonder, if one day I disappeared like Maya, would you be sad? Or would you take over Thorn Blackwood and finish what Silas Vane never managed to do? The name Silas Vane dropped onto the table like a grenade with its pin pulled. Isabella froze. Her entire graceful facade cracked for a fraction of a second. I saw her pupils shrink, the cold and vicious gaze of Isabel Vane emerging from behind the mask of Isabella. Silas Vane? Why would you mention the name of that defeated man? Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear of me, but from shock at hearing the name spoken by the man she believed to be broken. I don't know, I said with a faint laugh, waving my hand like a confused old man. Maybe I read it somewhere in the old files. I just feel the name has a strange connection to architecture. The collapse of an empire always begins with cracks its owner cannot see. Don't you agree? Isabella stared at me for a long minute. She was trying to determine how much I truly knew, or whether these were simply the ramblings of a drugged mind. I returned the most empty, harmless look I could manage. You're tired. Let's go to sleep, Isabella said suddenly, standing up. I'll make you some herbal tea. You need deep rest so you can attend the award ceremony tomorrow. Yes, I need sleep, I said, rising as well. A long sleep, so when I wake up, everything will be exposed under the sunlight. As I walked up the stairs, I could feel Isabella's gaze stabbing into my back like poisoned needles. I knew she would not sleep tonight. She would call Julian. She would check everything again. Suspicion had been planted, and in the world of criminals, suspicion is the strongest catalyst for mistakes. I entered my room, locked the door, and took out the recorder Miller had given me. The entire conversation, the guilty silence and her accelerated breathing when Silas Vane's name appeared, had all been captured. I stood by the window, looking down into the garden. The ficus plant I poured the coffee into earlier had begun to droop. The poison was spreading through it. "Your structure is already cracking, Isabel," I whispered into the darkness. "And tomorrow, I will be the one who removes the final brick." I took out the brass compass again. The needle still pointed east. Tonight was the last night I would live inside this lie. Tomorrow, the award ceremony would not be a celebration of a philanthropist, but a public courtroom where the ghosts of the Thorne family would demand justice. I lay in bed, breathing steadily like a man sinking into a drugged sleep, but my mind was somewhere 10 miles away, the office on the 28th floor of the Thorne Blackwood Tower. Beneath the pillow, the tiny earpiece Miller had given me crackled softly. I had activated the automatic recording system. The signal transmitted from the bugs I planted in Isabella's office came through with chilling clarity. "Have you prepared everything, Julian?" Isabella's voice echoed through the device. There was none of the gentleness she had shown me tonight. It was the voice of an ice queen delivering a sentence of execution. "Everything is ready, Bella," Julian replied, followed by the sound of wine being poured into a crystal glass. "The automatic fire suppression system in the western section of the 28th floor has been disabled through a fabricated error code in the building management software. Stratos' team has placed aluminum thermal blocks at the main electrical junctions. One remote activation command and they will ignite. The temperature will rise to a terrifying level within seconds." I clenched my teeth. As an architect, I knew exactly how devastating fire could be to steel structures. If the temperature exceeded the critical threshold, the entire skeletal frame of the 28th floor would lose its load-bearing capacity. The formula for calculating the standard temperature of a structural fire ran through my mind. With aluminum thermal blocks, the rate of heat escalation would be 10 times faster. They did not only want to burn the office, they wanted to collapse the entire central section of the 28th floor, the place where the hidden basement was located. "And the girl?" Isabella asked, her voice cold, as if discussing a piece of furniture to be discarded. "Maya will not feel anything in time," Julian said casually. "The smoke from the acoustic insulation in the basement will make her unconscious before the flames reach her. After that, the debris will bury everything. The police and the fire investigators will conclude it was an electrical short from the aging system. We will receive $50 million in insurance compensation for structural and corporate data loss. And most importantly, there will be no living evidence. And Elias? Tomorrow morning, after your speech at the award ceremony, I will take him to a special treatment facility at the retirement center in Vermont. He will be injected with a sedative strong enough that he cannot distinguish reality from dreams. A week later, when the news of the fire and his daughter's death spreads, we will announce that he committed suicide from grief. Everything will end with public sympathy for the devoted widow, meaning you." Isabella's laughter echoed through the recording, dry and chilling. "Thorne Blackwood will soon return to its original name, Vane Industries." My father can finally smile in his grave. I turned off the listening device. My heart pounded as a cold fury filled my mind. They did not only want to kill Maya, they wanted to use the very building I had designed as the crematorium for my daughter. I sat up. The darkness in the room seemed to thicken around me. I could not wait until morning any longer. I needed to contact Miller immediately. I slipped downstairs into the study and used the secure satellite connection I had established the night before. Detective Miller appeared on the screen. He looked sleepless as well, his red eyes fixed on the tracking data from the monitoring devices. "Did you hear it, Miller?" I whispered. "Every word, Elias. They are real demons. I have a private rescue team disguised as cleaning staff ready. We will be on the 27th floor as soon as the ceremony begins. But hacking the projection system at the event is your part. You must ensure that when Isabella steps onto the stage, the entire world sees what we have seen. I can do it, I said firmly. I have prepared a compressed video file containing footage of Maya imprisoned in the basement, the audio recording of tonight's conversation about the arson plot, documents revealing the true identity of Isabel Vane. I will transmit it directly to the presentation server through the architect's administrative access port they never disabled. Good. But remember, the moment that video appears, Isabella and Julian will become extremely dangerous. They will try to eliminate you before the police arrive. I am not afraid, I said, looking at the photograph of Clara and Maya on my desk. I already died once on the night Maya disappeared. Now I am only a ghost collecting a debt. I spent the rest of the night reviewing the plan. Exposing them would not be enough. I had to ensure Maya was rescued before the fire could begin. Detailed plan. 9 a.m. The ceremony begins in the main lobby of the building. 10 a.m. Isabella delivers her speech. This is when I activate the projection command from my personal laptop. 10:05 a.m. Amid the chaos, Miller and the rescue team break through the wall from the 27th floor to extract Maya through the technical route I mapped. 10:15 a.m. I confront Isabella directly on the stage. I look down at my hands. They were no longer trembling. Weakness had been burned away by truth. Isabella believed she had locked me inside a wall of deception, but she forgot that when an architect understands the structure of a building, he also knows exactly how to bring it down in the most controlled way. I took out Maya's old brass compass and wiped away the last specks of dust. Wait for me, Maya. Dawn is coming, and the darkness will have to retreat. I lay back down on the bed as the faint first light of morning began to appear beyond the Boston horizon. Today would be a day of honor, but not for Isabella. It would be a day honoring truth, and the day of purification for those who dared to touch the Thorne family. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. The final battle had arrived. The main hall of the Thorne Blackwood Tower tonight glittered more brilliantly than ever. Thousands of crystals from enormous chandeliers reflected light across the pristine white marble floor, creating a breathtakingly lavish atmosphere. Gentlemen in elegant tuxedos and ladies in shimmering evening gowns held glasses of expensive champagne, their murmured conversations blending with the soft strains of a symphony. Everyone was here to honor Isabella, the woman known as the Angel of Boston, for her tireless charitable work for missing children. A bitter irony that almost made me burst into laughter in the middle of this crowd. I stood in a shadowed corner, adjusting my tie. In the mirror, the 42-year-old man with sunken eyes and a slightly pale face still looked like someone consumed by depression. I was still playing Isabella's puppet. Beneath my tailored suit, the thin tablet connected directly to the building's presentation server system was gradually warming up. Elias, my love, you look wonderful. Isabella approached me. She wore a pure white silk gown, looking as immaculate as a lily. She slipped her arm around mine, and the cold touch of her skin made me shiver. You look beautiful too, Bella, I said hoarsely, like a man deprived of sleep. Today, everyone will see who you truly are. She smiled, completely satisfied, believing I was praising her beauty. Thank you. Julian said everything is ready. After the ceremony, we will have a new beginning. A new beginning in hell, I thought silently. At exactly 10 p.m., the lights in the hall dimmed, leaving only a white spotlight focused on the main stage. Isabella stepped forward amid thunderous applause from hundreds of guests. She stood behind the podium with a giant 20-meter LED screen behind her, displaying the Thorne Blackwood corporate logo and a sorrowful black and white image of Maya. Distinguished guests, Isabella began, her voice persuasive and filled with emotion. Family is the foundation of every enduring structure. When Maya disappeared, my heart shattered. That pain drove me to establish this foundation so no father or mother would ever experience the loss my husband, Elias Thorne, endured. She gestured toward me, inviting me to come onto the stage. Applause rose again. I walked slowly, my right hand gripping the brass compass in my pocket, my left hand resting on the activation key of the tablet hidden inside my speech folder. I stood beside her. The scent of Chanel No. 5 was so overwhelming it made me nauseous. Isabella handed me the microphone, her eyes glittering with complete triumph. "Please, Elias, say a few words about our mission." I took the microphone and looked down at the crowd. Cameras from the largest television networks in Boston were aimed directly at me. Julian sat in the front row, smiling knowingly, his fingers toying with his phone, likely the device meant to activate the aluminum thermal blocks on the 28th floor. "My name is Elias Thorne," I began. My voice no longer trembled. It rang sharp and cold like a hammer striking a nail. "And today, I want to show you a structure I have never revealed before. A structure built upon lies, blood, and tears." Isabella frowned slightly and reached for the microphone, assuming I was having a mental breakdown. "Elias, you're tired." "I am not tired, Isabel Vane," I said, turning to look directly into her eyes and speaking the true name of my enemy. I pressed the activation key. The entire sound system in the hall suddenly shrieked with a piercing screech before falling silent. The LED screen behind us flickered, and instead of the corporate logo, a dark and chilling scene appeared. It was a live feed from the secret basement on the 28th floor. The entire hall held its breath. On the screen, a frail, pale young girl sat curled up on a white bed, her empty eyes drawing dark spirals across the wall. "Maya?" someone gasped from the crowd. "That is not an old photo," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing throughout the hall. "This is live footage from Isabella's office in this very building. My daughter did not disappear. She has been imprisoned there for 7 months by the woman standing beside me." Isabella froze. Her face turned ghostly pale beneath the flashes of cameras that had begun firing rapidly. "No, this is fabricated. He's insane," Isabella screamed, but I did not allow her time to defend herself. The screen shifted to another clip. It was the recording from her office the night before. The voices of Isabella and Julian echoed clearly, filled with cruelty. "Maya will not feel anything in time. The smoke from the acoustic insulation in the basement will make her unconscious before the flames reach her. We will receive $50 million in insurance compensation." Shock swept through the entire audience. The murmurs quickly turned into furious shouting. Ladies covered their mouths in horror, while politicians and businessmen stepped away as if Isabella were a source of contagion. "And this," I continued, as the screen displayed the true identity of Isabel Vane, the daughter of Silas Vane, along with medical records proving the poisoning of Clara. "This is why my family was destroyed. A 15-year vendetta driven by madness." Isabel, looked around desperately. The same people who had been praising her minutes ago now stared at her with disgust and contempt. Her mask had completely collapsed. Those once pure blue eyes now burned with the fury of a demon cornered with nowhere to escape. "You!" she hissed, lunging toward me with claw-like hands. "You should have died long ago, Elias." Julian attempted to flee from the audience, but Detective Miller and his partners were already waiting by the doors. They swiftly tackled the treacherous lawyer onto the marble floor. In that moment of chaos, a dull explosion sounded from somewhere high above the building. The tremor rippled through the structure, making the crystal chandeliers sway violently. "Julian, you fool! He activated it!" Isabella screamed in madness. Smoke began rising from the ventilation system in the hall. The aluminum thermal blocks had begun to ignite. Isabella tried to seize the moment of chaos to escape toward the private elevator, but I gripped her wrist tightly. "You're not going anywhere, Isabel," I growled. "You will stay here and watch your kingdom of lies collapse." My grip, strengthened by years of lifting steel beams as an architect, left her unable to move. She stared at me in utter terror as she realized that the man she had despised for so long was now the executioner of her downfall. Below the stage, the police began flooding into the hall. Red and blue lights from fire engines flashed outside the glass doors. The public, who had witnessed every crime through the live broadcast, were shouting her name in furious rage. This was no longer a ceremony of honor. It had become a public execution of reputation. Isabella stood there beneath relentless flashes of cameras, her platinum hair disheveled, her white dress stained by the filth of truth. She had lost everything, her reputation, her wealth, and her power. But my mind was no longer here. I looked up at the ceiling where the smoke was growing thicker. "Maya," I whispered. "Miller, please, tell me you saved her." I looked down at the brass compass in my hand. The needle remained steady, as if waiting for a true beginning beyond the ashes of this betrayal. The purge was complete. My life would truly begin only when Maya was free. The fire alarm wailed throughout the thorn Blackwood Tower like the scream of a wounded beast. Gray smoke began curling down from the ceiling, swallowing the glittering crystal lights that only minutes earlier had been honoring a murderer. The crowd of guests panicked, trampling over one another in search of an exit. In the midst of that chaos, I saw Isabel Vane, the woman I once called my wife, struggling to break free from my grip with the frenzied strength of a cornered animal. "You won't get it, Elias," she hissed, her nails tearing across the back of my hand. "If I can't have this empire, your daughter will go to hell with it." Taking advantage of a collision from the fleeing crowd, she drove the sharp heel of her shoe into my foot and slipped away, sprinting toward the private elevator reserved for the chairman. It was the only route that led directly to the secret basement on the 28th floor without passing through the general control system. "Isabel!" I shouted, ignoring the pain in my foot as I rushed after her. But a figure stepped into my path. Julian. The treacherous lawyer looked miserable, his tuxedo disheveled, and his face drenched in sweat. He was trying to push through the crowd toward the emergency exit reserved for employees. "Move aside, Elias. I had nothing to do with this. She planned everything," Julian shouted, clutching the leather briefcase filled with illegal authorization documents. He had not taken another step when a massive hand seized his collar. Detective Miller emerged from the smoke, his iron gaze fixed on the lawyer. "Where are you rushing off to, old friend?" Miller growled, slamming Julian onto the marble floor. "You've got a lot to explain to the FBI about that $50 million insurance payout. Drop the briefcase, or I'll help you break a few ribs." Julian trembled and collapsed to his knees. "Miller, please. I can testify against her. She killed Clara. She forced me to do it." I did not stay to listen to those cowardly words. My only destination was the 28th floor. I saw the private elevator doors closing with Isabel's deranged face disappearing behind the steel panels. She was going up there to activate the final aluminum thermal block located directly above Maya. Or worse, to kill my daughter herself before the police arrived. I ran toward the stairwell. Each step felt endless. My lungs burned, my breathing breaking apart under the smoke and exhaustion. As an architect, I understood the structure of this building better than anyone. I did not climb to the 28th floor by the usual route. Instead, I turned into the technical level of floor 27, where the ventilation shaft I had used the night before was located. By the time I climbed into the duct, the temperature had already risen significantly. The metal expanded with heat, producing terrifying cracking sounds. The fire equation was unfolding directly above me. I had less than 5 minutes before the steel structure began to warp and collapse. I kicked open the vent hatch and dropped into the secret basement. "Maya!" She was lying on the floor, smoke from the acoustic insulation beginning to fill the room. Maya coughed violently, her eyes weak as they looked toward me. Before I could reach her, a dark figure stepped out from the corner of the room. Isabella stood there, holding a small pistol she had taken from the safe in her office. Her face was completely transformed, her makeup washed away to reveal a raw, primitive cruelty. "Stop right there, Elias," she screamed, the barrel of the gun aimed directly at Maya. "One more step and I'll blow her brains out in front of you." I froze, raising both hands as my heart nearly stopped. Police officers were beginning to appear at the basement entrance, but they could not fire because Isabel was using Maya as a shield. "Isabel, look at me," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm. "You've already lost. Julian has confessed. The entire world saw that video. You cannot escape from here. Put the gun down and at least you'll keep your life." "Life?" She laughed hysterically, the shrill sound clashing with the fire alarm. "You think I care about life after your family destroyed mine? My father died in this cursed office 15 years ago. You and that woman Clara laughed over his corpse to build the Thorn Empire." "Clara didn't know about the suicide until it was too late, Isabel. She regretted that takeover for the rest of her life." "Regretted?" Isabel hissed through clenched teeth. "Regretted while using that money to buy mansions and send her daughter to international schools? I lived in slums, working like a prostitute just to survive, just to pay for school, to change this face, only so one day I could stand here." She stepped closer to Maya, pressing the barrel against my daughter's temple. Maya closed her eyes as tears streamed down her face. "Do you want to know the truth about Clara, Elias?" Isabel whispered, her smile dripping with venom. "The police said she died of heart failure? No. I personally prepared that poison. I befriended her, listened to her complain about her headaches, and then gently gave her those vitamin pills that took me years to develop. I watched her fade away in your arms, and I felt such satisfaction seeing you suffer." The blood in my veins began to boil. The last trace of weakness vanished, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp hatred. "You're a monster," I said, each word cutting like a blade. "You're not avenging your father. You're using him as an excuse for your own sickness. Silas Vane may have been a failure, but he was never a mass murderer like you." "Shut up!" At the moment Isabel prepared to pull the trigger, a thunderous explosion erupted from the aluminum thermal system in the ceiling. A burning piece of the ceiling collapsed between us. In the instant Isabel flinched, blinded by the sudden flare, I lunged forward like an arrow. I did not care about the gun. I did not care about my own life. I slammed into her body, knocking the pistol from her hand. We struggled across the floor amid thick smoke and falling fragments of fire. "Stay away from my daughter!" I roared, grabbing her wrist and smashing it against the edge of a stone table. Isabel screamed in pain, the gun flying toward the police officers rushing into the room. Detective Miller dashed forward, lifting Maya into his arms and carrying her toward the emergency exit. "Save Maya first," I shouted to Miller, while Isabel clawed wildly at my eyes. The police quickly subdued Isabel, locking her hands behind her back. She writhed on the floor, still screaming curses, her platinum hair now singed and coated in ash. I stood up and looked down at the woman who had been both my wife and the greatest enemy of my life. The release did not come from killing her. It came from watching her elegant mask completely stripped away. She was now nothing more than an ordinary criminal, trembling in humiliation among the ruins of her own conspiracy. "You will never see sunlight again, Isabel," I said coldly. "You will spend the rest of your life in a steel cage, just like the one you built for my daughter. The difference is that no one will come to rescue you." I turned away without looking back once. I ran toward Maya. Miller had already carried her into the corridor on the 27th floor, where the air was cleaner. I wrapped my arms around her. Her fragile body was still trembling, but her breathing was gradually steadying. "I'm here," I'm here now, Maya, I whispered as tears finally fell, washing away the dust of betrayal. Behind us, the 28th floor of the Thorn Blackwood Tower burned brilliantly in the dark Boston night. The blueprints, forged wills, and deceitful records of Isabel Vane were being reduced to ashes. My empire might partially collapse, but the true foundation of my life, my daughter, had been saved. The steady beep, beep of the heart monitor in the intensive care unit at Massachusetts General Hospital was the most soothing sound I had ever heard in my life. It was nothing like the dry ticking of the aluminum thermal bomb, nor the mechanical click of the secret basement door. It was the rhythm of life, a symphony of revival echoing within Maya's fragile chest. I sat beside the hospital bed, holding my daughter's small hand tightly. The calluses from gripping charcoal for drawing were still there, but the pale skin of Maya had begun to regain a faint blush beneath the warm yellow hospital lights. The doctors said the levels of scopolamine and digitalis in her blood were gradually decreasing thanks to continuous blood filtration. The formula for toxin elimination appeared in my mind, an architect now forced to learn how to read medical charts. With the current elimination constant K, Maya would be fully conscious within the next 48 hours. She had defeated death, just as we had defeated the lies. While Maya slowly recovered, the world outside the Thorn Blackwood Tower was shaking under the aftershock of the blood-stained ceremony of honor. Detective Miller allowed no one to escape. With undeniable evidence from hidden cameras and the recordings I had planted, the Boston prosecutor's office launched a massive sweep. The trial of Isabel Vane and Julian Blackwood became the center of attention across the United States. Standing before the court, Isabel was no longer the glamorous queen in the white silk dress. She wore an orange prison uniform, her face gaunt, her eyes still blazing with deranged hatred. She felt no remorse. She only regretted that the flames had failed to destroy us. Julian, on the other hand, completely collapsed. He attempted to shift every crime onto Isabel in the hope of receiving leniency, but Miller had uncovered money transfers from Maya's trust fund account into Julian's shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Isabel Vane. Life imprisonment without parole for murder, Clara. Unlawful imprisonment, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. Julian Blackwood. Life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 35 years for complicity in murder and large-scale financial manipulation. When I heard the verdict, I felt a strange emptiness. Revenge does not bring joy, it only brings justice. The vain empire that Isabel had long dreamed of restoring had now vanished forever with her sentence. The question that tormented me for months finally had an answer. Why had the police in search and rescue teams failed to find Maya from the beginning? Why had she been imprisoned right beneath the 28th floor without anyone knowing? The answer lay in corruption within the system itself. Detective Miller uncovered a horrifying bribery network. Inspector Henderson, the man who led the investigation into Maya's disappearance 7 months earlier, had received more than $500,000 from Isabel through a fake charitable foundation. He was the one who deliberately ignored reports about strange noises coming from the 28th floor. He was the one who arranged for the search dogs to be kept away from the chairman's office under the excuse of business confidentiality. Even when a cleaning employee reported seeing the Stratos contractors transporting soundproofing panels during the night, Henderson destroyed that report. Justice was blinded by green bills, Miller told me when we stood outside the courthouse. Henderson and 3 other investigators were arrested and stripped of their ranks immediately. It was a heavy price for betraying the oath to protect the public. Sitting in the quiet space of the hospital room, I looked out the window. The Thorn Blackwood Tower was now sealed off. Half of the 28th floor burned black, its rusting steel frame exposed. It looked like a massive scar across the Boston skyline, a reminder of the danger of blind trust. As an architect, I had learned the most important lesson of my life. A structure needs more than a beautiful design. It needs an honest foundation. If not for Miller's surveillance devices, if I had simply rushed out and accused Isabel based on emotion alone, I might have been sent to a psychiatric hospital exactly as they had planned. In this world, truth only has power when it is accompanied by physical evidence. I made the mistake of handing over every key to both the house of my soul and the house of my finances to someone else simply because I wanted to escape the pain. Trust is a virtue, but trust without vigilance is suicide. Justice never arrives on its own. It demands persistence, courage, and sometimes sacrifice. If I had given up on the night I discovered the compass, Maya would have remained a ghost forever in that basement. I looked down at the old brass compass resting on the table beside Maya's bed. Its needle had finally settled, pointing straight ahead. It was no longer a mechanical trap. It had returned to its true purpose, guiding the lost back home. "Dad?" A faint, gentle voice called out. I startled. Maya had opened her eyes. They were no longer empty or clouded by drugs. The light had returned, the intelligent and resilient light of a thorn. "I'm here, Maya. I'm right here." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. Tears of relief rolled down my face. We had lost so much. Clara was gone. Our old home was filled with painful memories, and my career stood on the edge of reconstruction. But when I saw the faint smile on my daughter's face, I knew we had gained the most precious thing. We had survived. And from the ashes of betrayal, a new life was truly beginning to grow. A year has passed since the thermite fire consumed the 28th floor of the Thorn Blackwood Tower. Today, the Boston sky is a flawless blue without a single cloud, and the sea breeze carries the salty taste of freedom instead of the stench of the dark conspiracies that once filled the air. I stand before the building's entrance, looking up at the structure to which I devoted half of my life. The dark scar high above has vanished. In its place stands a modern structure of reinforced glass, allowing sunlight to penetrate into every deepest corner. I personally tore down the oak wall in that hidden basement. There is no longer any place for darkness. There is no longer any place for deadly secrets. The name of the corporation has also changed. It is no longer Thorn Blackwood, a name forever tied to the traitor Julian. Now the gleaming brass plaque hanging in the main lobby clearly reads, Maya Child Recovery and Protection Center. After the case, I made a decision that many shareholders considered madness. I withdrew from the commercial real estate market and turned my own headquarters into a non-profit organization. The 28th floor, the place where Maya was once imprisoned, is now a modern operations center for private investigators and psychological experts who specialize in locating and supporting children who have gone missing or suffered domestic abuse. We work with Detective Miller, now the head of security for the foundation, to build an early warning network designed to prevent tragedies like Maya's from ever happening again. I realize that true wealth does not lie in the number of properties I own, but in the number of lives I can rescue from behind silent walls. Maya has changed as well. She is now a first-year law student at Harvard. Nightmares still visit her sleep at times, but the sharpness in her eyes has returned. We attend therapy together every Friday afternoon. Those hours have become the most precious time in my life. In that room, I am not a renowned architect, and Maya is not a victim. We are simply a father and daughter learning how to trust this world again. "You know, Dad," Maya said to me during a recent session, "I don't hate that basement anymore, because in that darkest place, I knew you would always find me." As for Isabel Vane and Julian Blackwood, I no longer concern myself with them. Miller occasionally informs me that Isabel is undergoing psychiatric treatment in prison. Her obsession with her father, Silas Vane, drove her to completely lose her grasp of reality. She built a wall of lies around herself so solid that in the end, she became trapped inside it forever. Julian is serving his sentence in a maximum security prison on the outskirts of the city. He has lost everything: his honor, his law license, and the filthy money he once possessed. It is the fairest sentence for those who place greed above human life. Officer Henderson and the corrupt colleagues who were entangled with him also received their rightful sentences. The Thorne family case has become a textbook lesson within the Boston police force about integrity and the importance of cross-checking evidence. Late in the afternoon, I take Maya to the shores of Cape Cod, where we used to go with Clara in the past. Waves crash against the rocks, sending white foam into the air. I take the old brass compass from my pocket. It has been restored, its glass surface shining again, the scratch shaped like the letter M still there as a reminder of courage. I place the compass into Maya's palm. Keep it, Maya. This time, it will guide you toward new journeys, journeys of light. Maya smiles and closes her fingers tightly around the compass. She looks at me, her eyes reflecting the brilliance of the sunset. You taught me that architecture needs a strong foundation. I think I found mine, Dad. It's the truth. I look out across the vast ocean and feel a sense of peace I have sought for so long. The journey behind us was a brutal nightmare, but it forged me into a different person. I am no longer the Elias Thorne who was blinded by love or crushed by pain. I have learned that truth may be concealed behind walls of deception, but love and unwavering faith will always find a way out. A structure may burn to ashes, an empire may collapse, but the soul of truth is eternal. We walk along the sand, leaving parallel footprints behind us. I know that life ahead will still bring challenges, but with Maya beside me and truth as our compass, I no longer fear any darkness. My story, from the old brass compass to the ashes of the 28th floor, is not only a journey of revenge, but also a costly lesson about trust and awakening. Before closing these lines of memory, I wish to send you, those who have walked beside me through every tense breath and every heartbeat of fury, a few heartfelt words from the heart of an architect who once allowed the foundation of his family to crack. As I shared from the beginning, this is the journey of Elias Thorne, but I must also clarify a matter of principle. This story has been adjusted by my collaborators and me in order to bring you the most cinematic and dramatic experience possible. Therefore, I want to affirm once again, any resemblance between the names of characters, locations, or specific events in this story and real life is entirely coincidental. We have no intention of attaching, implying, or defaming any individual or organization in the real world. This is a fictional work inspired by the hidden corners of human psychology, told as a warning and a lesson about trust in modern society. Finally, allow me, Elias Thorne, to bow my head and thank you with the deepest sincerity. Thank you for not abandoning me during the darkest chapters, when it seemed I had lost everything. The companionship of the audience is the driving force that allows stories like this to continue being told, so that truth always has a voice and justice always finds a path forward. If you feel this story deserves a place within the blueprint of your memory, I invite you to join me in building a community of people who remain aware and awake. Press the subscribe button and the bell icon. It is not merely a technical action, but a commitment that we will never lose each other within the labyrinths of deception. A single like or share from you is a way for us to tear down the silent walls that may be imprisoning someone out there. Always keep your compass from losing its direction. Farewell, and I will be waiting for you at the next design.